Salut, c'est Géraldine, bienvenue sur Comme une Française TV, Sound French, even to the French. From Nathalie l'Ancien to Catherine Deneuve, French women have always played their part in our country's history. Scientists, thinkers, artists, and even world leaders, let me share with you the stories of a few of these amazing women. Marie Curie. Marie Curie was born in Poland at the end of the 19th century. She became French when she married Pierre Curie, a physics professor and scientist. Marie Curie herself was also an exceptional scientist. She first won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903 with her husband for their work on radioactivity. Later, she won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her discovery of a new element. She was the first woman to ever win the Nobel Prize and the only woman in recorded history to ever win the Nobel Prize in 2 different scientific domains. That's awesome! After Pierre died in 1906 in a tragic horse wagon accident, she founded a physics and biology laboratory to study radioactivity for both physicists and physicians to work in. In the 1920s, her lab started to find cures for cancer through radioactivity, the basis for radiation therapy. While Marie herself sadly discovered that working around that much radioactivity gave her leukemia. She kept working as the director of her research lab until she died at age 66 in 1934. Her daughter, Irène Joliot-Curie, followed in her footsteps, also winning a Nobel Prize, getting more involved in politics, but sadly also dying of radiation-induced leukemia. Marie Curie is still fondly remembered as she gave her name to many lycées, streets, hospitals. Her ashes are now homed in Le Panthéon in Paris, you can visit, and her former lab is still active under the name l'Institut Curie, the Curie Institute. The institute also hosts a free museum, le Musée Curie. If you're in Paris, you can visit her former lab to learn much more about Marie Curie and the Curies, the 5 times Nobel Prize winner family. Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc, or Joan of Arc, is a heroine of French history, a 15th century world leader and a Catholic saint. She was born around 1412 during la Guerre de Cent Ans, La Guerre de Cent Ans, the 100-Year War. At this time, the French faction were losing to the English invasion. When Jeanne was 17, this young peasant girl famously heard voices from God telling her to kick the English out. We say bouter les Anglais hors de France. Bouter les Anglais hors de France. She eventually managed to meet the young French king Charles VII, and was charged to lead French troops in her mission against the English. At the time, the whole northern half of the country was occupied. The south was still holding on though, all thanks to the river La Loire. La Loire. Why? The only bridge crossing the river was in the city of Orléans, which was being besieged by British armies. Jeanne managed to break the siege and free the city, earning the nickname La Pucelle d'Orléans. La Pucelle d'Orléans, the Maiden of Orléans. Thanks to her victory, the king was able to be crowned in the ancestral city of Reims, like his predecessors had for centuries since the first Frank king Clovis. Jeanne d'Arc's actions boosted the country's spirit and inverted the course of the 100-Year War. Sadly, she was to be betrayed by her own king, who stopped supporting her. In a later battle, she was captured by her enemies and sold to the English. Yay! She was tried for heresy for daring to wear masculine clothes and armor. She was found guilty in an unfair trial, so she was burned alive in the English-held city of Rouen in 1431. 20 years later, the Pope officially cleared her name. 500 years later, since the 19th century, she's seen as an essential patriotic figure. Rouen, where she died, holds an impressive museum about her life story. She's also been depicted as an epic heroine worldwide in countless artwork, stories, theater shows, movies, etc. Her name has since been given to both a rose and an asteroid to live on. Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir was a philosopher, a writer, and a leader of feminist thought in the second half of the 20th century. She was born in Paris in 1908. At the age of 15, she decided she would become a famous writer, and she did! With her lover Jean-Paul Sartre and other Parisian intellectuals, she was a leading figure of a philosophical movement called l'existentialisme. L'existentialisme. A philosophy of freedom and the burden of personal choice where life has the meaning you give it. This school of philosophy increased in popularity and the Beauvoir-Sartre couple became famous public figures. They were vocal opponents of many institutions, including marriage and monogamy. Simone was renowned for traveling and writing about her positions on atheism, communism, and existentialism. Her most famous work started in 1949 with Le Deuxième Sexe, or The Second Sex, a book that laid the foundation for large parts of feminist theory and women's liberation as well. She also fought strongly for the right of abortion. She was famous for hanging out in the Parisian neighborhood of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, especially in Le Café de Flore, where you can still have a coffee or a drink nowadays. Simone de Beauvoir died in Paris in 1986, aged 78. She gave her name to a prize for women's freedom and to a famous Parisian bridge. If you want to know more about her, I strongly recommend her biography Les Mémoires d'une jeune fille rangée, Les Mémoires d'une jeune fille rangée, which I love, or Memories of a Dutiful Daughter, as it is known in English. I love this book. Georges Sand. Georges Sand is a masculine pseudonym that a French writer, Aurore Dupin, chose for herself. Living from 1804 to 1876, she was one of the most prolific authors of the 19th century, publishing more than 70 novels and 50 volumes of short stories, tales, plays, and political essays. Wow! Georges Sand first wrote about women's experiences and their revolts against the prejudice of a conservative society. Her positions were controversial at the time, in both her work and her public life. She was wearing men's clothes, had a string of lovers, and had started a trend of women writers using masculine pseudonyms. In her domain, she housed the best artists of her period: Balzac, Flaubert, Delacroix, Liszt, and she had a famous affair of 10 years with Polish pianist superstar Frédéric Chopin. Her political work also involved the defense of factory workers and the poor, as well as ideas for the design of a peaceful, classless society. Under Emperor Napoleon III, she was a staunch Republican and a socialist. However, in 1871, she condemned the violence of La Commune, a popular revolt in the heart of Paris. I've talked about this episode before in the episode about Le Sacré-Cœur, so check this out. This revolt was suppressed in blood by the bourgeois government, and this repression was supported by the intellectuals of the time, who only saw the Commune as disorder and counterproductive destruction. Nowadays, her work is still alive and it has been regularly published and adapted, and you can still visit her domain in Nohant, or learn more about her in Paris in le Musée de la Vie Romantique. Le Musée de la Vie Romantique. Louise Michel. Born in 1830, Louise Michel was a teacher, a feminist, a Freemason, and an anarchist, and a main figure of La Commune. She started out as a teacher in her hometown. Then she moved to Paris, where she also became a writer and an activist. In 1870, when the Socialist Revolt started, she was one of the most radical leaders. While Paris was being starved by the Prussian siege, she founded une cantine, a canteen for her pupils. As the guards and soldiers were befriending the rebel population, she wanted to keep the offensive and attack the official government in Versailles. But her project never took, and soon the government army came in and began the rebel repression. She was captured and sent to La Nouvelle-Calédonie, La Nouvelle-Calédonie, New Caledonia, where she became an anarchist. When she came back to mainland France in 1880, she led meetings and manifestations defending le prolétariat, all while being under heavy surveillance by the French police. She was a political activist right up her death at 74 in 1904. Along with Georges Sand, Louise Michel was one of the very few feminist women of her century to wear men's clothing at times. Nowadays, she's mostly remembered for her actions towards the social revolution, as she called it, and remains an important figure of the far left and anarchist circles. More than 150 French schools in France are named after her, as well as a Parisian metro station. Et toi, have you heard about these women? Which other famous French women do you know of? Who are the most amazing women from your country's history? Tell me in the comment section, I want to hear from you. If you're on YouTube, you will find a link below the video to the blog communefrancaise.com. On the site, I read all the comments and answer all your questions as well. Did you like this video? Do you want more of those? Let me share exclusive lessons, private offers, and my 10 favorite Commune Française handpicked episodes with you by email. It's super easy to join. Leave me your email and your first name and I will get back to you straight away. Subscribe now to get my best content straight to your inbox. The fantastic stuff that's not even on YouTube. And the best thing is, it's free. Merci for watching Commune Française TV. Sound French even to the French. Allez, salut!